hashtags Investment Hub, MedCity HQ, and Advanced Therapies. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce the COO of MedCity, Nikki Bromwich, which will introduce you to our work and why we're here today, basically. Nikki, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nikki Bromwich, Chief Operating Officer at MedCity. Welcome to this afternoon's Investment Hub event showcasing advanced therapies. As many of you know, MedCity is the cluster organisation for the world-leading health and life science community in London and the Greater South East of England. MedCity promotes the region internationally and attracts businesses into the cluster. We simplify the ecosystem for both international and domestic companies, supporting them to locate in the region, collaborate with researchers, and seek investment. MedCity is a catalyst and a convener in the system, and we build communities. So two of our strongest communities have been brought together this afternoon, the Advanced Therapies Network and the Investment Hub. The Advanced Therapies Network, or ATN, is a delivery partner for London Advanced Therapies and has over 800 academic, industry, NHS and policymaker members, and runs events covering areas of interest and specific challenges in commercialising advanced therapies. For example, logistics, manufacturing and reimbursement models. And this year, virtually, we've also run events with Japanese and Korean partner organisations, including a speaker from our German sponsor organisation, all discussing how advanced therapies are helping to combat COVID-19. With over 400 investors within our Investment Hub community, we review startups and curate and showcase the best opportunities to the right investors. This afternoon, we're bringing together these two strong communities, and I'm excited to learn about the issues surrounding investment in early stage advanced therapy companies. And with a strong pipeline, we want to understand how we can make the UK a better place for investment and support the SMEs who are developing these important therapies. We're delighted to welcome Silicon Valley Bank and Oxford Biomedica, are going to present their fundraising story. We will also hear pitches from 4 diverse early stage companies who are developing exciting technologies right now. Finally, we'll have the opportunity to listen to what I'm sure will be a fascinating fireside chat involving Syncona, Appletree Partners and a family office to learn from these investors, some of whom have already invested in advanced therapies, and understand their reasons, concerns and challenges they face. Thank you very much. Welcome to the event, and I'll now hand back to Joanna.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you for this lovely introduction. Now I would like to introduce Flavia. I don't know if she joined us already. Do you know, Sarah, if Flavia Popesco has joined us from Silicon Valley Bank?
I know that she was running late. I can't see her in the participants. I've been trying to find, so I'm apologies. Okay.
If she comes in at some point, maybe she can do her presentation after Oxford Biomedica and the discussion.
Apology, I'm just looking in there.
I don't think she might be running late. Maybe we should carry on and then she can present after the discussion.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Otherwise we're going to run. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So maybe we will hand over to Catherine from Oxford Biomedica. Catherine is the Head of Corporate Development and Investor Relations at Oxford Biomedica, and she will present to us their case study on fundraising. Catherine, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And the discussion will be moderated by Sarah Hayward later, but yeah, over to you, Catherine.
Thank you. Let me see if I can just share. I need to share some slides, so somebody else needs to stop sharing.
You can just, so I've given you co-host, so you should just be able to share and it will automatically come up.
Okay, right, yes, okay, second. Let's see if that's going to work. No. Right, that's not quite right, I think.
Okay, if I stop sharing. and then I
okay,
can just
let me try
Yeah.
again. That's share scaring, advanced portion of the screen.
Yes. Yes, we can see.
Right, you can see, but I think you can only see a bit of the yeah, let me try and just put that into a different.
There's a view option.
Sorry, yeah. Let me what's happening there? Yeah, you can just see part of that screen at the moment, can't you? I think.
Do you want me to see if I can change the zoom ratio?
That's it. That should be it. Is that
Perfect.
good?
Yeah.
Good, right, thank you. Sorry, I'm more of a Microsoft Teams person, so right. Well, thank you for inviting me today. My name is Catherine Isted, and I want to talk to you about Oxford Biomedica and how we have raised funding to grow into the cell and gene therapy global leader that we are today. As a way of background, I head up corporate development and investor relations at Oxford Biomedica. And during the last 3 years, we've actually done 3 fundraisers, and that has totaled £110 million. And prior to joining Oxford Biomedica, I spent 15 years as a partner in 2 different investment banks, all in healthcare. And the majority of my job was actually raising money for biotech and medtech companies, either as straightforward fundraisers or as IPOs. So just to say that, or to remind the audience, this presentation may contain forward-looking statements. So let me start with a summary of who we are. Who is Oxford Biomedica? So we are a global leader in cell and gene therapy. We have a world-leading lentiviral vector platform. So for people that don't know lentiviral vectors, basically they are one of the ways that you are enabling cell and gene therapy. So they're a key part of this cell and gene therapy revolution. And why is cell and gene therapy so important? Well, the idea is it's basically one treatment and then you're done. In terms of Oxford Biomedica, we work with multiple partners across the pharma and biotech industry. We work in cancer, haemophilia, cystic fibrosis, and very recently we've been involved in Astra's COVID-19 vaccine. We are growing very quickly. A year ago, we had 10 partner programs. We're now at 20. And I think we're probably best known, prior to our work with Astra on the vaccine, for working with Novartis on Kymriah. This was the first FDA-approved CAR therapy and really was a game changer for this area of medicine. So as well as working with partners, we also work on our own products, and these are very important. So we work in Parkinson's disease, childhood blindness, and cancer. So this slide shows a bit about our business model and strategy. Our strategy has 2 legs, and different investors have different views over which side of the business they prefer. So let me just start explaining the model. So overriding the whole business is this platform. So we have lentiviral vector platform. So basically think of this as the envelope around the gene of choice that you're trying to get into the body. We have IP, patents, and know-how. These are valued by our partners to the extent that every single deal that we do, we actually get royalties, as in royalties on sales of the back-end products. Our facilities are key. We have just built a new 80,000 square foot facility in Oxford, and actually very timely, because actually 3/4 of it now is actually producing the Oxford vaccine. Our expertise in the space, I think, is unrivaled. Our CSO, for example, has been around for 20 years in lentiviral vectors, our CTO nearly as long. And quality systems might look an odd thing to be a part of a platform, but in the end, when you're trying to get FDA approval, you need to know that you have the systems in place that you can prove that each batch has that consistency that the FDA needs. You need to have all the IT systems in place. And that is one of the reasons our partners come to us. So looking at the 2 sides of the business, the CDMO side. So this is where we work with partner programs. Now, this is, I think, what investors think of as the low risk part of the business, because effectively we make money from partners from day one. They bring us a problem. Their problem is we have a gene. We think the lentiviral envelope is going to work well. We need to know if we can scale this up to a size that is commercially viable. So we get paid to do that development work. We get development fees and incentives along the way. And then once we've developed the process, we then make batches for them, get batch revenues, and then on the back end, we get royalties. So we have 20 partner programs there. And I think certainly in the UK, that's the side of the business that people look at. They say, right, if we want to make a bet in cell and gene therapy, maybe we're not quite, if you're not a specialist investor, you might think, how do I choose between one biotech company or another biotech company? Well, I think they see Oxford Biomedica as a play on the space. We're not spending R&D money there. We're just enabling these other companies. However, we do see a huge value in developing our own products. And that's the pink side. So our gene therapeutics proprietary products. Yes, there is a higher risk level there. And again, that's a different appetite for investors. But when you get that right, it can pay off in reams. So of our 8 programs, we can either out-license them or internally develop them. I think our most well-known out-license has been of our Parkinson's program to Gene Therapies. That was called Axovant until last Friday. And basically there, we got a $30 million upfront and $850 million as the BioWorld deal. So I think it really shows when you get that side right, it can offer huge upside. So just briefly, I just wanted to run through some of the successes that we've had over the last 12 months. And this is just some of our partners. So Novartis, and I mentioned them about Kymriah. Basically, we signed a 5-year extension to the deal we had with them back in December, taking the number of programs from 2 to 5, and then they added a 6th program there with us. So if they're doing anything in lenti cell and gene therapy, we are their partner. In March, on probably the worst day in the FTSE 100's record, we actually signed a deal with Juno Therapeutics that had been recently acquired by Bristol Myers. That was for 4 CAR TCR-T programs and a license deal figure of $227 million. We've also signed deals with Santen and Beam. And then I think most recently people have taken note of our Oxford Biomedica because of our work with AstraZeneca, and we signed an 18-month supply agreement with them in September, basically making significant amount of doses of vaccine, and I think, fingers crossed, I think for all of us that is successful. So we have seen tremendous success, but in terms of what investors want to see, it's like, how does that translate to revenue growth? But it is key for people to understand that while we've got the revenue growth, it is not the right time for us to leverage profit. We see this cell and gene therapy as being very early in the cycle still. We compare it to antibodies going back 20 years. They were the early innovators, and those people, they stayed ahead of the crest of the wave, innovating, and they're the ones that are still benefiting from the products that are out there and the IP and the royalties they're receiving from them. So the way that we look at the business is we look at the underlying growth. So this is actually the blue growth, the blue bars in this bottom left-hand chart. And that is the money and the revenues that we receive from our bioprocessing. So that's making batches for partners and commercial development. And that's effectively when we are developing the process for them. We are slightly seasonal, but every H1 on H1, you can see we've got growth, and the same on H2 as H2. And in the first half of 2020, despite COVID, we managed to grow that by 24%. And at that time, there's no impact really from the AstraZeneca on that. Our EBITDA, you can see, is more up and down, and that depends more on these pink bars that are in this revenue chart, and that's our lumpy milestones. So when we get milestones, they drop through straight as profit. So anything in pink is 100% profit. So they do impact our EBITDA. They are far harder to predict, which is why we say if you want to measure the progress of our business, look at that underlying growth in that bioprocessing and commercial development. So I think the last few slides have shown how, you know, we've become a very successful company in the UK with a bright future. But I think the question for many of the people in the audience is, how did we get to where we are today? Now, Oxford Biomedica has an incredibly long history. This was certainly not done overnight. So the technology came out of Oxford University. It was actually, the company was originally listed on AIM in '96 and then full list in 2001. So over 20 years history, and it was this summer that we reached the milestone event of moving into the FTSE 250. We employ, we believe, the best scientists in the field, but the number of scientists has grown significantly as well. So only 80 people back in 2014, and we're estimating in excess of 650 by year end. Also, of more interest to investors is how has the investment grown. And we've actually gone from a market cap in January 2019 of 34 million to around 700 million if you look at it today. So a very big increase in growth, but it certainly wasn't an easy ride. I think you can actually see that very clearly here. So this chart shows the market capitalization of the company since IPO, and you can see it's far from straightforward. We had many years, about 15 years, where I think there was many questions from the outside world whether Oxford Biomedica would ever make anything of themselves. And it took until 2017 for our fortunes to change. So, you know, 20 years into the development of the company. The next slide is going to show and explain a little bit behind the reasons for this change. But I think, put it simply, people started to believe in cell and gene therapy. Before, they thought it was a good idea, but was it ever going to be a reality? And what happened in 2017 was that was the date that Novartis got approval for Kymriah for acute lymphatic leukemia. And people really started to realize this area will be something. And some of the large pharma companies that hadn't invested in this area started to look around for acquisition targets. And we have seen that this area being quite acquisitive. So looking at some of the reasons for the growth and maybe things that, you know, investors in the audience should look at if they're looking to invest in this area. I'm actually going to start with the bottom chart, and this is the number of clinical trial initiations. So we've put all the different vector types that are out there. The main ones really for cell and gene therapy are lenti, which we work on, as AAV, and something called gamma retro. Adeno is really only for vaccines, and obviously that's going to increase that number significantly in 2020. So for lenti, you can see the number of programs in 2014-15, it was around 17 or 15 programs. We're now in the last 2 years up to 42 programs. So when you have clinical trial initiations, that's billions of pounds or dollars that are going into this area. These clinical trials, they are going to get to a stage where they will need to work with a partner to commercialize their product. And that's where we look to get in, because really the only other option is they try and commercialize themselves. And I think as people have realized over the last few years, and we've seen with Bluebird, the manufacturing is not easy. In the olden days, in small molecules, the manufacturing of a small white pill, I think that was just seen as, oh, well, that's just something you do at the end, and there's a multitude of manufacturers. People now really realize that actually sometimes finding the gene is the easy bit, but actually managing to manufacture it at scale for a cost of goods that is sensible is actually the really tricky bit. And that's really where Oxford Biomedica comes in. So you can see it in the clinical trial initiations. But also, I mean, I've taken this quote from Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner. And the point I want to make here is what he said is by 2025, we predict that the FDA will be approving 10 to 20 cell and gene therapy products every year. That's a huge increase. And I just think, it shows this new paradigm shift in medicine that we've now got, that it used to be antibodies, Now it's the time of cell and gene therapy. The final chart, actually top left, was really actually some internal forecasts of the size of the market. There wasn't really anybody out there that could forecast, what was the size of this market. This is for making batches. So back in 2018, we gave it a go with what we knew and what we knew of clinical trials that are underway, and that was the pink bar, and we got to a market size of 800 million by 2026. And we redid that again very recently, and we're now in excess of $1 billion, and that is only for the batch manufacturing, not the development side, that we are key as well. So it's, when I said the batches, if you think of CDMO, it's the M bit is those batches, the D bit, the development bit, is the bit that I think is really unique to Oxford Biomedica. And as we mentioned before, we get paid for doing work for our partners in that area too. So just going back to the chart I showed earlier, and I think it's maybe important to have a think of what kept us going through, these hard times. I mentioned that we'd raised 110 million in the last 3 years, but we also raised 200 million prior to that, in those years where you can see basically share price up a bit, down a bit. It wasn't really going anywhere for a while. Even back in September 2016, so that was the last raise before Kymriah was approved, we raised £10 million then. That was done at £1.50. So we're now at about £8.60, so 600% higher. I think the point is here that, if you keep going, you will reap the rewards, and for investors as well. There is real value there as well in these type of companies. So the survival story of these early years, how did we go about keeping the company going? Raising money for drug development. So in our early years, we were more of a drug development company. We weren't really partnering with people. So I was more on that pure biotech side, so that pink slide of our strategy slide. And it was so cutting edge, it was hard to get people to believe. I think the key thing really in trying to present a case where it is hard is you have to take out all the jargon. And I know that's easily said, it's easier said than done. When you're in a pharmaceutical company, you get used to the jargon. Even being in the healthcare sector, as I have, 25 years nearly in total in various roles, you forget sometimes jargon that we use that a generalist investor doesn't, understand. So I think trying to sort of bring that down to a level, and you might think that you're trying to, because you're using simplistic language, maybe you're being condescending. I have never found that case, and I've thankfully got some very good friends that are generalist investors, and sometimes I try a pitch out on them, and they're always incredibly grateful that you bring it down to a level. These are educated people, but they're just not specialists in our area. Anyway, so that was just a little aside on how to try and get that traction with people that are generalists. The other thing that really helped us actually was we did manage to get a good amount of retail interest. So a lot of smaller companies don't have the retail. We've now got over 5,000 retail investors out of a total investor base of about 6,000. It's probably actually near 5,500. But what that does do is provide a bit of liquidity, and that is really helpful. So trying to sort of keep engaged with that retail side. We did, however, when times were tough, have to turn to some venture debt to keep the business running. It was quite expensive, but in the end, this money was used to build the facility that we produced Kymriah from for Novartis. We had to do it. It paid off. We've now paid off that debt, but it was a way of keeping the business going. For us and for other companies out there, the government support. I mean, we've had about 5 different grants over the years in total, in excess of £15 million from Innovate and AMSCI grants. These have really helped in certain times when almost keeping the lights on to keep things moving forward, particularly in some of those years when the markets were particularly tough. And obviously R&D tax credits particularly help as well. Also, as a company, we have had support from Novartis, and we've also even had loans from investors. But again, going back to the point that investors that did take the opportunity at the time, the rewards have been great. But as a company, I think what kept us going, and I think it's that sheer determination and self-belief in the science that kept us all going. So that self-belief and determination in the end comes down to our people. They have been the reason for our success to date, and they are the reason why OXB will continue to go from strength to strength. Also, those are the people that are going above and beyond at the current time. I mean, they are working flat out at the moment, producing as much of the Astra vaccine as possible. Many of them, I'm sure, will be losing their Christmases and New Year over it as well. So, it's a huge thank you to our people for where we've got to today. And actually, I think a broader thank you, to be honest, for all of us, if this Astra vaccine works, for what they're going to be giving up in the months to come. But when you're looking at an investment, I think it is really important to look at the management team as well. Times, as we've seen, are not always easy at a biotech company. If you've got a good manager, he will keep those staff together and motivated even through those tough times. And we've certainly had some very tough times where money was running out within, we're talking weeks as opposed to months. We've still managed to keep our CSO and CTO and a multiple of staff. Some of this, the more grey-haired ones on this page, have also been around for a significant number of years, to keep those good staff, and they're now enjoying the good times. But actually, it was the good management that kept us going through that time. So I think the question is, so why do we, the employees of OXB, have so much passion about what we do? And I think, to be honest, you can roll this across to any company that has lots of energy for the science they're in. I think in the end, certainly for us, and I think for people in this space, it's because their science can make a real difference. I wanted to share a picture with you of a girl called Emily Whitehead. She was the first patient ever treated with Kymriah for acute lymphatic leukemia. She had only weeks left to live. She had literally tried every treatment. They had all failed. And as you can now see, basically after one infusion, she's now 8 years cancer-free. And I think it's a real reminder of what we do really makes a difference. Today, Oxford Biomedica has this new challenge, and that's to produce as much vaccine as we can to help Astra. Now, assuming we have, good trial data, so fingers crossed for all that, we'll be saving lives there too. I hope that's given you a good sort of flavour of what Oxford Biomedica is about, and a bit about our history, and I'm happy to answer questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was great. I would like to hand over to Sarah Haywood, Managing Director of MedCity, to moderate this discussion. Thank you so much, Sarah, and welcome.
Thanks very much, Joanna. I hope that everyone can see me. Catherine, thanks very much for that presentation. Can I remind everybody that if you've got specific questions over this next part, which I anticipate will be about 15 to 20 minutes, please do type them into the chat, and then I can pose those to Catherine. I'm not sure what everyone can see. I've got a background slide, so I don't know if you can see me, but that doesn't matter. You don't need to be able to see me. Catherine, thanks very much for that presentation. We had the opportunity to speak yesterday, and you have got a huge amount of experience within the life sciences sector in terms of supporting companies to raise funds, both from your background in the banking sector and also more recently by being in-house at Oxford Biomedica. So let's start with a question that really is focused perhaps to those in the audience that are young companies and are at the beginning of the journey that you have described with Oxford Biomedica. What are your top tips for starting out raising money?
Right, okay, well, I think the first thing is choose your advisors very well. You have to have somebody that is with you for the long term. There are different types of banks out there. Some will be there to try and raise you a bit of money, but then you won't see them again. I would recommend not working with that type. I would work with somebody who is there for the long term. They will help you through the ups and the downs. You will never have a smooth run. That just doesn't happen in biotech. You will have difficult days. There will be days when trial data doesn't go your way. Now, at Oxford Biomedica, for example, we have had somebody that's worked with us for 10 years. We have 2 brokers, and one of them has been with us for all that time and has seen how hard it's been to get to where we are today. And we really value that advice. So I think that's the first thing. Choose wisely. If you're raising money, obviously slightly different in this virtual world. The presentation is something where, so it's something I used to do a lot. I used to get presentations from companies that are IPOing, and you'd look at them and go, right, okay, we need to work on this. And that, I'm being slightly polite here. You need to have somebody that can be a good sounding board for what the investors are looking for in the presentation, because you can put all the science in there, but if you've skipped over some of the big picture items, you're going into the weeds too quickly. So you need somebody that is basically doing this, I'd say, day in, day out, to look at the presentation, to cut it down to the really key points. Now, if you've got somebody that's a specialist and maybe did their PhD in your particular area, that's great. You can have those conversations. You can even have a huge appendix. I mean, we actually have a huge appendix in our standard corporate investor presentation, because we do come across people that have done lentiviral vectors as PhDs, and sometimes we want to go into clinical data, but to pull that out from the main presentation. So that will be another key thing. And I think even more in the virtual world, because people can't see you, that presentation probably has even more power than it would do when you're sat in the room. So I think that's probably 2 of the key points. There's probably loads of others, but just in case there's other questions, maybe I'll stop at that.
Okay, so there are some questions coming through, which is great, but I'm just going to pick up on a couple of those issues that you raised. So you talked about the importance of advisors, particularly in the banking sector, that you can really build a relationship with and have a relationship of trust and sticking with you through the ups and downs. I expect for lots of companies starting out, they're probably not thinking immediately about building a relationship with a bank. They're probably thinking perhaps more about engaging with angels, with family offices, with perhaps VCs that operate in the earlier stage seed phase. So at what stage do you think it is right to start talking to banks?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I mean, I've seen companies with valuations of less than 10 million that are listed. So, but in terms of when you start engaging, the really good thing about engaging with a bank early is they will be able to help you to say when you should be looking about making that next move to maybe a listing as well. So they can help you with that roadmap. So when you're going to angels or other investors, you maybe know, actually, I've got 2 more private rounds before I can actually be in a stage where a trusted advisor can think, okay, you're now ready to move on to the to be listed. You definitely don't want to do it too early. That is a huge mistake. And they may, good advisors will tell you, no, go away and do another private round. But the point is, they are there helping. And also, it may be even helping about which area, if you've got a choice of investment areas, if there is choice. They might better say, well, if you go down that route, that may speed up your time to market. If you go down that route, well, you're not going to get to a certain data point which would be adequate enough to get to market. So I think if you can find those people early on, you don't need to be in there every week. It might be just an introduction, a quick hello, and you have a meeting every, I don't know, twice a year, 3 times a year, but you're also in their mind, and they can be very helpful. And the good Manx will, they also are working on a pipeline of companies as well, so they want to find those next gems that are coming through as well and help develop them. You then have within those banks a lot of other expertise as well, which you may be able to draw on. Again, maybe advice with working on PR companies. So I would, there's no reason to hold off to have that initial conversation, I would say.
Great. I'm going to turn to some of the questions that have come through, and then maybe towards the end, if we've got time, we can pick up some of the things about operating in the virtual world, which you touched on as well. So the first question that I've got is, and I don't know whether you feel that you can answer this, Catherine, because it's probably a bit more around the science, but you talked in your presentation about the fact that Oxford Biomedica has sort of 2 different elements to the company. You've got the platform technology operating as CDMO, but you've obviously also got therapeutic research and development activities. So one, Timothy Newton's asked, can you tell us a little bit more about your CAR-T plans with Foremost?
Yes, that's a very interesting. Now this is interesting. It's more of a case of, this is a very early stage collaboration. We have a CAR-T that we are developing ourselves, targeting 5T4 for hematological cancers. We are looking at, I'll say, next generation CAR-Ts, and we believe that some of the work that Foremost is doing could be very complementary to us. So if you think of current generation CAR-Ts, they're all ex vivo. You are autologous route. So I think the whole world is thinking, what is after that? And there's various options that you could go down. Could you go down a route of allogeneic CAR-Ts? Could you go down the route of potentially in vivo CAR-Ts, which is sort of another paradigm? So I think all I can say is we are looking for our CAR-T therapy to be one of those next generation CAR-Ts, and the Foremost technology, we are looking at whether it can be very complementary in achieving that. So we haven't gone into too much detail around the science, I'm afraid.
Okay, great, thank you. So a question that's come in that is asking about your views on relationships with the academic base, and how you balance that relationship, particularly in relation to managing IP.
Right, now, so that's a really interesting area, actually, that in terms of working with academics. So there's several areas that we would look to work with academics. We don't certainly believe that all the great ideas in Lenti comes from Oxford Biomedica. So we want to work with various academics. If there can be some sort of collaboration, we're very happy to have a look at that. Maybe it's a piece of work that we actually say, look, we're really interested potentially on acquiring that piece of work. So this is such an early area at the moment of lentiviral vectors, that there will, of course, be some great technology and innovations that come out of not only industry, but the academic world. So, yeah, we are actively looking at that area. The other thing is that we are trying to sort of, I think, help embed is the fact that some of our processes make lenti manufacturing very efficient. So by working with partners in the academic area, potentially giving them the option to use some of our IP and know-how, they get to use that for free. That make the difference between a product being successful or not. We wouldn't charge them for that IP, but as and when, if they then out license that later on, obviously there is IP in there. And so, and maybe that partner would want to work with us later on, because the academic is never going to do the scale up work. So it's a way of speeding up innovation in the academic environment by using some of our IP. And if it's successful, then to be honest, we all win. The product or the program for the academic has moved to the next stage. And for us, we've managed to help that program with some of our cutting edge IP, and in due course, if that progresses, then we have a chance to obviously to work with the go-to person then to have a relationship with afterwards.
Right. That question came in from David Chapman-Jones. David, I've got a couple of versions of the question that have come through on the chat, and I'm not sure that I've done full justice to your question. So can I invite you just to unmute and just say whether there was anything else that you wanted to cover?
No, thank you, Catherine. You've answered it quite well. I mean, I was specifically referring, actually, although you've answered it in terms of the wider sphere, in these emerging process developments in AAV, and in a way, your view, and it is only just your view I'm seeking, on how investors view what you've sort of alluded to, in a way, IP that sort of goes back and forward. So it may come from an original source and then is developed maybe in an academic environment and then goes back again, and how investors looked at that as being problematical or difficult, given the expectations of some academic institutions about what they think they own.
Yeah, I think, certainly from OXB's stance to date, we've not had a problem with that. And I think if there was a piece of IP that we would, if we wanted to bring it in-house, we would fairly value it. And if the expectations were higher than we thought was reasonable, because there's normally more than one way to skin a cat, and there's all sorts of ways that we can improve our process. So absolutely, we are looking to increase our process and the number of doses, for example, per batch by another 10-fold. We've already done it 10-fold already. That will involve various technologies, and if some of those technologies are out of university, we'll value them in the same way as we would value maybe some technologies that are on the market. I don't think it's something that investors should be overly concerned about. It's something certainly that we've never tripped up over. I think maybe some other companies in the space have failed to take IP licenses when they needed to, and are now having to pay the price in terms of some of their royalties. But certainly from our side, I think we work with academics very fairly, so I wouldn't see it as an issue for our investors.
Great, thank you.
Catherine, I'm conscious of time, but a slightly different question, which has come in from Alex Blythe. Do you advise using third parties to initiate license and commercial deal conversations because they've got access to the right people, or do you do it yourself? And I think he's looking specifically to your relationship with Novartis.
Right, okay, yeah. So it's interesting. So certainly Oxford Biomedica, we have a very large BD team. We do it all ourselves. There isn't the only third parties that get involved are obviously the lawyers, which you have to get involved. Even there, we have an in-house counsel now, just because of our size. We didn't have that until relatively recently. I wonder for smaller companies though, and I do know various of the companies I've advised in the past, they have potentially used third parties, and I think it just depends on the extent of whoever's doing that out licensing's I suppose, network and what they can draw on. So even I'd say people that are very well networked can still have a benefit if they're looking to out license. So if you're out licensing, for example, a program, you've already done the European out license and you're looking for a US out license, if your strength isn't in the US, then probably you do need to go via a third party. But if you've come from the industry, you have a very strong network, then you probably have a few shots that you're actually aware of yourself anyway. So I think it does depend on the size of the team. But no, certainly for us, the way we work, we are at all the conferences. I think the thing is now Oxford Biomedica is very big. If you want to work in Lenti, you know, they've seen Novartis, they've seen Juno sign up with us. We don't almost need to say, hi, we're here. People go, well, I guess we need to speak to Oxford Biomedica as one of the maybe 2 or 3 people that we're going to speak to anyway. So it is a bit further on now. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Catherine, thank you. I'm really conscious of time because I know we need to hand over to Flavia to speak. Oh, hang on. So are we going to move that, Joanna?
Hi, Sarah. So since we are more or less on time and Flavia has kindly given up her slot, I think we might take a break, a 10-minute break now, and be back at 4. Feel free to leave your Zoom open. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the discussion.
No, that's okay. So I was just going to wrap up, if I might, Joanna, by saying, Catherine, thank you very much for that and for sharing your insights. As I said in introduction to the Q&A, you bring a vast amount of experience from both the advisory world, but also within the companies. And I think one of the messages to take home, particularly for the smaller companies that may be on the call, is, you know, the slide that you put up, the story so far, it took a while, and the message about determination and strong management through the ups and downs. So thank you very much. It's fantastic to hear what a great growth trajectory Oxford Biomedica has, and all strength to you all as we move forward with you move forward with the manufacturing endeavour on the vaccine. So thanks very much. Joanna, I'll let you let people know what's happening next. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, now we'll have a short break. We will be back at 4 p.m. Feel free to leave your Zoom open, and we'll kick off with company showcases at 4 p.m. starting with Raja from 8 p.m. PS. 8 p.m. PS. See you in a bit. Thank you. We managed to actually get on board 4 different companies addressing different aspects and using different technologies, which was quite cool. So advanced therapies includes a lot of things, not just cell and gene therapy, can include regenerative medicine and biomaterials, and also all the technologies that can support them. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Raja to present ATMPS. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Joanna, if you can just let me know that it's actually showing to everyone, and then I'll carry on.
Yeah, it's sharing now.
Oh, sorry, I'll start it at the end. So ATMPS is a spin out of another company called PharmaTrust. We specialize in blockchain based pharmaceutical tracking software. Essentially what we do is we ensure that all the different stakeholders that are involved in a particular treatment or indeed in a particular entity, be it for medicines, can have full visibility of their supply chain. In terms of what we do, we actually have a full vein-to-vein traceability platform, which allows multi-treatments, multi-patient and multi-stakeholder engagement. And we provide the information to all the stakeholders in real time. We ensure that the data is anonymized and secure, and we also look to automate some of the processes. And we're also looking now into seeing whether we can do digital regulatory submissions as well as payments. The base of our proposition is that we are able to give the incorruptible and immutable quality or characteristics to the data that we record, and we use that by by using distributed ledger technology. The market I won't go to because I think we've all heard Catherine, but although this is quite a nascent market, it's growing very quickly. Treatments themselves, as Catherine mentioned, can be quite expensive. So having full chain of custody, identity, and condition of both the samples and the treatments themselves is critical, because mistakes can be very, very expensive and can also lead to a liability. Our platforms help reduce that risk. Our platform can also be used for allogenic treatments as well as the autologous treatment. So it gives that ability for hospitals to have one system that they need to log into, rather than the current view at the moment with different cell and gene therapies seem to having their own web portals or methods of collecting and screening patients. So in terms of the cell and gene therapy problems, at the moment, a lot of hospitals are still using manual records, paper-based records. Labeling is not very efficient and in many cases doesn't comply with data protection laws. And there are multiple systems or data silos that don't speak to each other. Of course, this prevents that whole interoperability and the efficiency, cost control that most of the stakeholders in the cell and gene therapy area are looking for. We have created a system which brings all the different stakeholders together on one platform with data integrity assurance, as well as the ability to compartmentalize the data. So a regulator, for example, sees different data to, say, a courier, or for that matter, that patient data is kept on-prem on hospitals and doesn't leave the premises. And I'll show you that in the product demo itself. What we do is our Hatali system allows hospitals to choose multiple treatments over one single system, book the courier, book the slot in the labs, and even be interoperable with the MES systems that many of the manufacturers might be using, and ensure the treatment comes back to the hospital at the right time, at the right place, with the right people. So we essentially ensure that the scheduling system is also a key part of this solution. We are interoperable. We can work with many different systems. If there is not a system, then we have various smart device apps which will allow us to track a particular sample or a particular treatment. So in terms of our traction, what we have managed to do is we've worked with the cell and gene therapy catapult to really refine our solution. We've also integrated it into the University Hospital Birmingham to test that there is interoperability between the University Hospital and our system. And we have signed a number of partnership agreements in Europe to ensure that we can spread our system throughout Europe. In terms of competitor analysis, as you can see, there's only 3 main players in this area, Veneti, Traxa, and ourselves. And we have a lot of distinguishing characteristics over and above these competitors. We are a seasoned group in terms of management team. We're mainly grey-haired guys who are from the technology sector, but have a lot of experience in terms of bringing companies to market and, of course, floating. So why do we need additional funding? We are at that stage where we're in really the growth phase and scope. And so we need funds to get specialist business development, people with the right connections to aggressively market our product. And in terms of investor incentives, we have been categorized as a knowledge intensive company by HMRC. So that not only gives investors a lot of incentives to invest in us, but also a lot of tax efficiency gains as well. Now, I think I am running out of time. So I might not be able to do the demo, but we are now focusing on the UX and UI of our system, which I've given you a snapshot here, to make it very easy to use. So we're going from the technical functional type UX UI to more consumerist, minimalistic. And the reason we do that is we want to really minimize the timescales for people to train and use our system to make it as easy to use as possible. Now, Joanna, I'm just conscious I've only got 2 minutes left. Do I have time for a demo, or should we open up for questions?
Well, you might not get much time for questions. You might get just one question.
Okay, in that case, yeah, let me take questions then. And of course, people can contact me if needs be, and I can do a full product demo to those that are interested in it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Raja. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them on the chat. I will kick off with a question. So I was just wondering, how personalized can your platform be in terms of process monitoring with the pilot plants, with the production plants, with the production of the cell therapies?
Okay, so our system was built to integrate with PASX, which is a Verum product, but we can also integrate into Siemens or Emerson as well. And we can also actually go even a stage further and integrate into LIMS. So we can really see the full vein-to-vein process and give that transparency to our clients and partners. So interoperability is a key element of our platform, and it comes into that whole blockchain cooperative ethos as well.
Absolutely, yes. So this innovation, you said at the beginning, is based on distributed ledger technology. Do you mind expanding on that? What's in practice for the process control and monitoring of the cell and gene therapy production and delivery, the logistics?
So rather than going into deep details in terms of how distributed ledger technology works, I'll give you the qualities. One is the data captured is immutable and incorruptible, so you won't be able to change it. You can update it, but you'll know who updated it, when they updated it, and what the update it was. The second thing distributed ledger is very good at is breaking down silos, and this comes back to the multi-stakeholder ability. So we can integrate into, say, a Thermo Fisher or a Cytivia or World Courier, as well as Autolus or an Achilles in terms of the manufacturers. And this is the quality that allows us to be able to allow them to work together and ensure there is efficiency in the whole process. The only data that leaves the hospital prem is a PUID, a unique identifier which we can tag, but no other data about the patient will leave the hospital premises. And this is quite key for GDPR, as well as NHS rules, actually, when it comes to patient data.
Great, that's great. I think we run out of time for this slot. Thank you so much, Raja. If anyone has any questions for Raja, please type them in the chat. We will make sure we get them to Raja to answer later. Thank you so much. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Raja, please let us know and we can put you in touch with the team. Thank you, Raja. Now, next, we'll hear from Agnieszka, founder and CEO of Renovus. Agnieszka,
yes,
are you there?
Yes, thank you very much. Just let me know whether you can see my screen okay.
Yes, I can see your screen okay. So Agnieszka, she's the founder and CEO of Renovus. And yeah, she'll tell you all about it. This is on biomaterials. Looking forward to hear it.
Great, thank you very much. So as Joanna introduced me, I'm Agnieszka Janeczek, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Renovus, a regenerative medicine company commercializing biomaterial technologies which are based on synthetic nanoclay gels. And since spinning out the company from Southampton University 3 years ago, let me just see, I cannot move the slide, great. We have made significant formulation and technical progress and have multiple animal efficacy data. We have a granted patent, an ongoing dialogue with a potential licensee, a strong scientific and commercial team, and our first product addresses a $1 billion market. Our technology, which is the Renovite nanoclay gel platform, is clearly differentiated from others in the regenerative medicine field. Renovite is easy to handle. It forms a biodegradable gel after injection and can deliver even 100 times lower doses of biologics than other formulations for the same efficacy, as the Renovite platform, and here crucially retains active agents and releases them only to target cells which interact with the nanoclay, and that circumvents many common side effects. So to date, we have secured equity funding and grants from the following organizations. Last year, Orthopedic Research UK, which is a charity, has invested in Renovos as their first ever equity investment in a startup, highlighting the need for our technology within the orthopedic patient pathways. We are now raising further investment for key safety regulatory compliance trials and to enable clinical trials to start in 2023. And to generate data required for the potential licensee, we've expected 10 times return on investment from the current round. So we have set up Renovos to solve key issues in regenerative medicine. We all know there's an unmet need for tissue repair, regeneration. It's growing because we have an aging population. There's many more young, active people. Stem cells within our bodies can regenerate damaged tissue, but they require activation by powerful biochemical molecules. And the key issue to overcome in regenerative medicine is to control the regeneration environment in vivo and safely and precisely deliver these molecules. So at Renovos, we have developed a proprietary platform technology through pioneering use of those nanoclay gels called Renovite, which solves the key issues and has the potential to transform regenerative medicine and orthopedics in particular. Our Renovite nanoclay gels are acting like injectable tissue templates and for minimally invasive delivery of healing agents. So Renovite nanoclay gels, firstly, they deliver and critically retain therapeutic agents. They don't release them, localizing them at a desired site of action at a much lower effective dose. And secondly, they release them only to cells that interact with the material, that biodegrade the material. So there's no release until the cells actually biodegrade the material. And that controls the biologic availability. So Renovite can also host cells. It biodegrades with time to get gradually replaced with the regenerative tissue. And by retaining the agents rather than releasing them, which is our unique selling point, Renovite contain difficult to handle healing agents, which you wouldn't want released systemically or even wider locally. And it accelerates regeneration and prevents side effects. So this can ultimately offer more economic clinical solutions for use of biologics in the clinic, better outcomes for patients in orthopedic, dental, skin, and other regenerative medicine applications. And as you might consider, we continue to expand our IP in many, many areas of RegenMed. So our first product, Renovite BMP2 gel, incorporates a bone-forming agent and addresses the $1 billion market, where 3.4 million spine procedures are carried out each year. And you can see the clinical use of BMP2 has been associated with many side effects. High doses have to be applied for the biologic, it's poorly localized, it's not retained. It results in bone forming outside of the skeleton, trapping nerves, or leading to tissue swelling, problems with swallowing and breathing when applied at the cervical spine level. So from preclinical data, we are confident that Renovite contributes to improved bone healing and bone fusion at an ultra-low dose of the healing agent as it retains it. So this injectable nanoclay technology offers a step change improvement in safety, efficacy, and ease of use while reducing adverse events and complications. So it fits seamlessly with existing procedures within the spine, but it can also potentially extend it to other orthobiologic applications for outpatient clinics and also minimally invasive applications. We have conducted external market access studies. We're confident we can attract premium pricing for our products and at the same time extend the BMP2 use to other applications and expand the BMP2 market. That's, as I mentioned before, it's $1 billion market. It's a fifth of the entire orthopedic biologics market. Our core team, which you can see here, has been working together over the past 3 years. We have the necessary technical and commercial expertise within the core team. We've advanced the company over the 3 years within the core team, but also utilizing clinical and commercial advisors when we need them. The technical team still stemming from the University of Southampton. We use regulatory market access experts and we're also supported by the Orthopedic Research UK network as our investor. we are now raising our Series A, and as a first tranche of that Series A, we're raising £1 million for key safety regulatory preclinical studies, and to generate data required for a potential licensee to reach the next value inflection point. Renovos is in discussions under NDA with a large cap medical device company. We ensure all our development aligns with commercial standards, and we're conducting studies to industrial protocols, so they're directly comparable. And this funding will also allow us to secure the supply chain, generate further IP, and work on follow-on products, because our model is to develop the first product, license it, continue development of other applications of the nanoclay platform. So please get in touch if you can help us bring this technology closer to patients. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Agnieszka. Thank you for that. Again, if you have any questions for Renovos, please type them in the chat. I will start. I don't know if I told you, Agnieszka, but I was actually doing bone regeneration research in my master's.
That's exciting.
So my first question is around, I worked with silica beads. So I worked with silica beads, and we put some collagen molecules on top of it to make the mesenchymal stem cells appear better. So it was very early days. My first question, because I don't see any silica beads in the clinic, no. What are the limitations in there, and what does the nanoclay actually has on them, basically?
Yeah, so silica beads wouldn't form gels like nanosilicates like the nanoclay does. So nanoclay is a colloidal gel, you can easily inject it. So with silica beads, they would, I think, require still another carrier to be truly injectable. But really, it is a different application. So silica beads would be more of a ceramic approach, and even when they can be combined with biologics, they still offer some form of a release. So either staggered release, controlled release. The key advantage of the nanoclay material is it actually retains the protein. It doesn't release. There's definitely no release from the protein until the cells actually interact with the material. And when you think about the clinic, when you think about tissue engineering bone specifically, the main role is always played in the cells within our body. So the nanoclay, by not releasing any cargo together with the cells, they actually orchestrate the regeneration environment in vivo and what's needed when. So, as we try and understand how bone regeneration works, that nanoclay really works with the stem cells within our bodies to orchestrate that in the right time, in the right controlled way. So that's hopefully answers your question.
Yes, it does. I had this in my mind since I actually heard from Renovos, so thank you so much for that. If no one has any other questions, I can carry on. So my next question is, it says that you're pioneering in the use of nanoclays, and I was just wondering if nanoclays has been around for so long, why now? What did you optimize now to actually take it to the clinic?
Yes, so nanoclays have been around for a while. They're used in cosmetics industry, toothpaste fillers, topical formulations. In a gel formulation as delivery for biologics, for drugs, for cells, they haven't actually been used. So that's why we're saying we were pioneering it. I think now we understand, and that kind of covers the previous question a bit as well, we understand more than to unlock the stem cell therapies and to unlock the stem cells also within our own bodies, it's key to control the regeneration environment in vivo. So we understand now more about how these nanoclays in the gel formulation work. They form injectable templates for tissue to grow on. After injection, they absorb local proteins, create this regenerative microenvironments. They retain the delivered cargo until the cells actually interact with the material. So that makes them more suitable for those applications. Also, like I said, we understand their mechanism of action now, and we are using them in a gel formulation as an implantable, injectable device for the first time.
Great. If no one else has a question at this point, feel free to type it later. We'll make sure that Agnieszka answers it. And if you're interested in learning more, we'll definitely put you in touch with Renovos. Thank you so much, Agnieszka.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will move on. Oh, someone asked a question. Okay, we'll just answer this one. How do you use these nanogels on tendons?
So we haven't researched tendon regeneration, but I can't see why not. It depends whether you want to deliver a biologic and what application needs. So consider these gels as non-load bearing scaffolds. So they really affect the biology of the healing. And I can discuss that in more detail probably offline, because we did look actually in now I remember in applications in the veterinary field for tendons, so can probably have a bit of a detailed discussion there about this. But I can't see why not. It's applicable to a wider regenerative medicine space. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that would be my next question, is what other applications is there, but we need to move on. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
I would ask Jaden to come on board now. Jaden from iStem. Jaden, if you're there, please make yourself known. And there you go. Hi, Jaden.
Hi.
Jaden is representing iStem. They use induced neuronal stem cells, and let's see what they're up to. Jaden, over to you.
Thanks, Joanna. Yes, I'm Jaden Smith from iStem Therapeutics. I'm the head of research there. So our aim is to establish a new era of autologous stem cell medicines through regenerative neuroimmunology. We were established in late 2019 as a spin-off of CITC Limited with academic foundations with the University of Cambridge. And it's our mission to improve the quality of life of patients with incurable neurological disease using our breakthrough stem cell technology. Our team consists of our CEO, Luigi Occupinti. He is a PI at the University of Cambridge. He has over 20 years in industrial research and innovation. And our Chief Scientific Officer is Stefano Pluchino, also a PI at the University of Cambridge, but also a neurologist. And he brings the 15 plus years of experience in stem cells and regenerative medicine, upon which the company is founded. They are joined by Kathy Prescott, our non-executive director. She has over 20 years experience in research and business within the life science and stem cell sectors. And I come from the postdoctoral position at the University of Cambridge, joining the company there. So the problem we wish to address with our technology is the unmet medical needs of progressive multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is a chronic neuroinflammatory disease. It affects over 2.5 million people worldwide, mainly in the prime of their lives. It involves an immune attack on the protective myelin coating of nerves, which results in problems with vision, movement, sensation, or balance. The disease typically presents as a relapsing remitting condition, for which there are a number of effective therapies. But most people ultimately develop a progressive form of the disease, which is associated with a gradual accumulation of disability, and for which there are no effective therapies. And so it is our goal to apply our technology to address these unmet needs, the technology being induced neural stem cells, or INSCs. INSCs are neural stem cells that are generated by direct reprogramming of a patient's skin cells, directly generating neural stem cells without going through a pluripotent state. This is a relatively rapid and easy procedure and can generate cultures that are highly expandable for potential therapeutic applications. The INSCs that are generated this way recapitulate the characteristics and therapeutic potential of somatic neural stem cells, which themselves have shown promise in clinical studies, showing effects such as slowing disease progression and improving functional outcomes. And we have extensive in vivo safety and efficacy data, preclinical data on the use of INSCs in animal models of multiple sclerosis. We see that transplanted human INSCs survive for several months in animal models, in mouse models, and they do so with very little proliferation and without the formation of tumors. And we can see that transplanted INSCs are able to form new myelin-generating cells, oligodendrocytes, and that upon transplantation into a model of inflammatory MS, EAE, we see that there is an amelioration of the functional deficits in mice with this disease upon receiving INSCs. We believe INSCs have a number of advantages over other prospective non-hematopoietic stem cells. Most stem cell therapies out there are mesenchymal stromal cells. Unlike those, INSCs have an intrinsic neural fate and can act via a well-defined mechanism of action. We've found that they are actually able to scavenge immunometabolites from the environment. As I said, there's substantial preclinical and clinical data supporting the potential of somatic neural stem cells in treating MS. But the use of neural stem cells has a number of practical and ethical issues associated with them, mainly because they are allogeneic fetal cell lines. And induced pluripotent cells, stem cells, are becoming a popular source of neurostem cells, but these require extensive in vitro manipulation, and there are concerns about residual pluripotency in the end product. So we believe that induced neurostem cells possess all the therapeutic utility of somatic neurostem cells, bypassing a number of the issues involved. So a brief overview of the competitive landscape of other cell products that are in the clinical stage, non-hematopoietic cell products. We see in this space, it is dominated largely by mesenchymal stromal cells and fetal neural stem cell lines. Most of these are not autologous, and they do not have a well-defined mechanism of action. And there's little focus on progressive MS as a primary indication. Looking at the broader market, there's of course a great need for CNS therapeutics and a number of unmet needs in that space. And we see that health economics estimates see a maximum UK revenue potential for the treatment of progressive MS of up to £32 billion. Looking at the stem cell space, there's a number of derivative applications, potential derivative applications of INSCs, both in other therapeutic applications in other diseases, but also in ancillary applications, including disease modeling and drug discovery. And so thus far, we have provided substantial preclinical safety and efficacy data. We have secured essential IP, we have prepared business case, and we also mapped our path forward. And our immediate goal is to attract investment in support of manufacturing development and regulatory approval of these INSCs ahead of first-in-human clinical studies. And towards this end, we have established a number of key collaborations and partnerships and mapped out the milestones we hope to achieve in the near future. Longer term, we are looking into R&D expansion into other indications, and also the development of biomarkers related to those disease and the use of stem cell products. So thanks very much for listening to my talk, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Great, thank you so much, Jaden. I was just writing in the chat that this might be quite complex for some people, so no questions are stupid questions. So anything that you haven't understood for some reason, feel free to ask, or if you need clarification on some terms, which for people that work in this sector might be quite obvious, but for people that don't know the sector, it is not. So please feel free to do so. And either ask the question yourself or write it on the chat. I will kick off and ask why there wasn't any biological targets for PMS at the moment. What was the limitation there?
Sure. I think there's two factors in play there. On one hand, it's unclear where or what causes the switch from relapsing remitting into the progressive state of MS. There's a switch sort of from the adaptive immune system to the influence of the innate immune system, and it's not really clear what causes that shift. So there's nothing really to target there at the moment to stop that progression. But once in the progressive states, the historical perspective has been basically that this is a disease. There's a loss of myelin from a loss of oligodendrocytes, and therefore axonal damage. And so basically the aim has been to try and reinforce the oligodendrocytes that are there, produce more myelin, target those oligodendrocytes. But recent evidence is suggesting that maybe the oligodendrocytes that are there are incapable of producing new myelin. There may be some deficiencies there. And instead of sort of progenitor cells that are being promoted into new oligodendrocytes to produce new myelin, it's in fact the old oligodendrocytes that produce the myelin, and they're all dying off in the disease. So there's a lack of a target there to actually produce new myelin. Sorry.
Sorry, that's very interesting. It gives us a bit of an overview of actually. So the problem, as you say, is that we don't know much about the mechanism of the disease, some aspects of it, yes, at least. Okay. So in terms of evidence that you have already in preclinical studies, I know you addressed myelin forming, the yield of myelin forming cells in mouse spinal demyelinations model, and you proved that they ameliorate a mouse model of MS. Is there anything else you need to do or are doing at the moment? Because obviously these inflammations are quite complex. Is there other tests that need to be done?
Yeah, definitely. So we see the remyelination as sort of a secondary measure at the moment. A primary goal will be to basically take advantage of this immunomodulatory effect from the transplantation, scavenging those immunometabolites from the environment. So we have a lot of in vitro, in vivo data supporting this mechanism of these induced neural stem cells, how they actually reduce inflammation. And we're looking at biomarkers in actual human tissues, in human samples, to see that we are in fact targeting something that is dysregulated in humans with progressive MS. Specifically, we're targeting the levels of succinate. These induced neural stem cells have a succinate receptor. They take succinate from the environment, and that causes an anti-inflammatory effect. And we see that succinate levels are dysregulated in humans with progressive MS. So we see there is a key target there, but obviously this needs to be validated. And really the only way to do that would be in clinical studies.
Okay, someone asked about your funding history. Do you mind giving some detail about that?
Yes, so iStem is a spin-off of CITC Limited. So we have some Innovate UK funding towards this project back when it was in as part of CITC. It's also, we've been awarded a Wellcome Trust Innovator Grant. So there's a lot of grant funding for this particular project. So it's gone from academia to CITC Limited, where it's been spun out into its own company. So at iStem at the moment, we're in negotiations with potential investors, but a lot of the initial funding has come down from CITC as the parent company.
Great. If there isn't any more questions, we'll move on. Thank you so much, Jaden, for your presentation. If anyone has any more questions, please get in touch with us. We'll make sure those get to iStem. And if you want to get in touch with the team, let us know. We'll make sure to connect you. Last but not least, I would ask Timothy to turn on your camera and your microphone and join us. So Timothy is from Reflection Therapeutics. There you go. Timothy, cannot see you yet. I don't know if you're turning on your camera or not. Oh, there you go. Hi, Timothy. You're still on mute. Can you unmute yourself? No. Well, we cannot hear you.
Timothy, you should be a co-host. You should be able to unmute yourself. I'm just going to try and unmute.
He seems unmuted on the participant list. It might be something with his microphone. I'm sure he's looking into it now.
Okay, so we could hear
you.
So
just to give a bit of background of Reflection Therapeutics while Timothy sorts out his microphone. Reflection Therapeutics is actually part of a Collaborate to Innovate cohort delivered by MedCity with London Advanced Therapies. So this cohort is focused on advanced therapies, and Reflection Therapeutics is one of the companies on these cohorts, and they are using regulatory T cells to address and treat neurodegeneration. So let's see if Tim will come up again. Let's see what's happening.
Tim, you're not muted, so it could be.
It might be something with the microphone.
No, we can't hear you. It's got to be to do with the mute sign's not coming up, but I wonder whether without the earphones,
This happened already when he joined today, so I don't know.
1 second, just give him 2 minutes. Sorry about this.
In the meantime, if you have any questions for any of the other companies, feel free to type them still. We'll make sure that they answer it. Perhaps if it takes too long, they can answer it now while we wait for Tim.
Okay, I'm just readmitting him, and so I just want to make sure that Tim can reconnect. Okay, try.
Is this working?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
There we go.
Back.
The old standard of switch it off and on again comes to the rescue. I believe I'll need permission to share my screen though.
Yes, I've just made you a co-host. Actually, there we go. So, okay, so
thank you very much. Well, sorry for the technical details. You should be able to see that screen now, I think.
Great. Over to you, Tim.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for bearing with me through those little technical details. It's amazing after however many months of video sharing, it still fails every now and then, but there we go. So yeah, my name's Tim Newton. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Reflection Therapeutics. And we are also interested in this really interesting interplay between neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration and how the immune system and the brain interact. Our first indication, though, is slightly different. We're primarily interested in motor neuron disease. This is sometimes called ALS and sometimes called Lou Gehrig's disease after a baseball player who caught it. And this really is a devastating condition. These patients slowly lose the ability to move, they lose the ability to communicate and lose the ability to breathe eventually. It's a rare condition with 50,000 patients across the US and EU, and there's currently no substantial disease modifying therapy available for these patients. So there's a really pressing clinical need for these patients. We're very interested in research coming out showing that the immune system and inflammation is very closely linked in to this condition. So we can see in histology work from intercostal muscles that inflammatory markers really coat synaptic end plates, and that's leading and driving synapse loss and stopping the nerve cells from speaking to the muscle. The problem is systemic anti-inflammatories aren't strong enough or selective enough to deal with this neuroinflammation. So we're really interested in some work that's come out from Professor Stanley Appel's work at the Baylor College of Medicine. And what Stan Appel did was that he took a particular cell type called a regulatory T cell. Now, these are our body's own way of shutting down inappropriate inflammation. They're very important regulatory T cells for preventing autoimmunity. And what Stan Appel did was that he took these cells from ALS patients, massively expanded them in the lab before putting that large number of cells back into the patient. And when he did, you can see on the bottom right there, he managed to delay and prevent the degeneration of those patients. So it was an early stage phase 1 trial, but its results were really astonishing. However, he needed really large dose sizes. These are untargeted cells. They just go all over the body. So he needed very, very large dose sizes. And because he was putting those large dose sizes in, the cells were consuming all of the cytokine signals they need to avoid apoptosis. So he kept on having to put this large dose in every few weeks. And this led to very high costs. So how do we make something that's much more efficacious and much more economically viable? Well, we need something much more targeted, because when it's targeted, they'll go to the right place and they won't be consuming high levels of cytokine that signal to them to prevent apoptosis. And that's the product that Reflection Therapeutics is making. We've developed a proprietary targeting system that only targets diseased motor neurons. Now, this is based on very well-established technology, such as CAR T therapy in cancer, but with our own proprietary targeting system. We also have survival and differentiation mechanisms to make sure that Treg stays a Treg and survives once it's reached its target. And that's going to deliver much greater efficacy and reduced dose size compared to what we've seen before. Now, this is the work we've done so far. We've gone all the way from target selection and receptor design, working out of things like HEK cells. We've then proved our system works in the GERCAT T cell line, which is a T cell that's expandable and usable in the lab, before then moving on to mouse Tregs in preparation for our in vivo work. And we now have an in vivo ready product that we can take to mouse studies. It's even active after freeze thaw and things like that. So we've checked that this therapy is something that can be transported and moved to our contractors as well. So this is just showing some of the data highlights we've got. We've shown that our Tregs in mice can be activated just as well with our targets as they would be by small molecule positive controls, which is really great. And these Tregs retain their activity after a freeze thaw, which we're really happy with. We don't just have to go after ALS. The targeting platform we've developed with some small modifications can platform out, and we can use this as a platform technology. So we can target, instead of targeting the brain, spinal cord in ALS, we could target the pancreas to treat diabetes, we could target connective tissue to target rheumatoid arthritis, or we could go after the gut to treat inflammatory bowel disease. So there's real options here to platform out into other disease areas. And here's some information on our key supporters. We've been very fortunate to get an Innovate UK Smart Grant, which is a very competitive grant programme. And we're backed with over £750,000. As mentioned earlier, we're part of the Collaborate to Innovate cohort, and Deep Science Ventures has given us some investment backing as well. But chief amongst our supporters is Greg Sandow. He's our senior advisor, and he's also put his own money into the company. Greg founded Cell Medica, which was one of the very first advanced therapy companies in the world, and in the UK especially. And he raised over $190 million whilst leading that company and guided them through to phase 2 clinical trials. So having Greg's wealth of experience on board and also his confidence in us is a really great asset to us. Greg forms part of our advisory board alongside Paul Wallace, who's the Chief Business Officer at Mission Therapeutics and has a wealth of experience in neurodegeneration business development. And Michaela Sharp is helping us with regulatory matters. She's developed regulatory strategies for over 35 advanced therapy products, so her advice is invaluable. Myself and Ola are the co-founders of the company. We both have experience in neurodegenerative work, in securing money for small biotechs, and in drug discovery work for neurodegeneration. And here's just a quick schematic of our plans and our funding plans going forward. We've already developed an in vitro prototype, and we're going to be putting this very soon into localization studies. So we're going to be putting these cells into ALS model mice and showing them trafficking to the brain and spinal cord. Once done with that, we're aiming to raise a seed round. That's to do further product development, show our efficacy in motor neuron disease model mice, and build out a manufacturing capacity before then moving on to a large Series A in order to get to a clinical trial. So that's the presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I'm really happy if anyone wants to get in touch, and our contact details are here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. That's great. Again, if anyone has any questions, please type them on the chat. We'll make sure they get to Tim either during the event or later. I will start by asking you, you said you could basically, because of this technology targets the neurons, the disease neurons, you could basically reduce massively the doses of drugs. How does that translate in terms of reductions of costs and patient quality of life? What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we estimated from Stan's work was that they were having to give this therapy every 2 weeks. Now, we believe that we could get away with a dose every 6 months or a dose every year, given our survival benefits we have for these cells and the much reduced numbers. One of the key reasons for this is that in the body, there's a cytokine called IL-2. Tregs need signaling from this cytokine, and essentially it sets a ceiling on the number of Tregs you can have. Stan was going well over that level and therefore had to keep adding in cells every 2 weeks, whereas we're aiming to stay under that limit. And with the survival and differentiation mechanisms we have inside that cell, we're aiming for it to persist for a very long time. So that means that the patient is not having to keep visiting the hospital, and that they're going to see a much longer lasting effect from this therapy.
But they would have to take it for the rest of their lives, but not as often.
Pardon?
They would have to take it for the rest of their lives, or can they stop at some point?
So that's debatable. Theoretically, it may be that you have to keep taking it, but we do know that Tregs can teach immune tolerance. So they can teach the body's own immune system to be tolerant of a particular stimulus. So if we see through our clinical data and our preclinical work in mice that we're having an immune tolerance effect, then it may well be that you have a one and done therapy.
Okay, we got some questions coming up. Bradley has asked, how is LifeArc involved? So
LifeArc have given us an award already. So we're part of an accelerator program at the Babraham Research Campus. And as part of that, LifeArc were organised a prize fund for the most progressed startup, which we won as part of that. So they've given us some cash, first of all, which is always nice. But secondly, they've also given us some really helpful advice on issues like IP, for example. And also we're chatting quite a lot with people like David Holbrook, who heads up the seed fund, and Enrique Milan and people like that. And they're full of advice as well. So advice and cash.
Great. Another question from David. You need to use mice. Can you use modeling? Yes, because it may limit funding opportunities as you are using animal models.
Yes, so what is that question? Is that question essentially about modeling the disease?
I think so. David, you want to come on and expand on that? Yes, he said yes.
Okay, great. I can't see the chat here, you see.
Yeah.
So yes, so it's very interesting. In ALS, the SOD1 model is what everyone uses. And for those, the uninitiated, this basically is a very aggressive animal model where a particular protein has been made to misfold and is overexpressed to very high levels. It's very similar and analogous to around 2% of human cases, but it is not similar or analogous to spontaneous human disease. So everyone uses the SOD1 model because it's the best animal model we've got, but there's a real debate as to how realistic this animal model is to the rest of disease. However, we do know that the same inflammatory response is mounted against this very aggressive insult. So we're able to use this model for targeting studies for sure. But in order to get something a bit more realistic, what we're doing is that we've partnered with the Crick Institute in London, and there Andrea Serio, along with Ricky Bettini, have got a very nice patient-derived stem cell model of motor neurons and ALS. So we're going to be able to put ourselves into that model and see whether we can see efficacy signs there with patient-derived stem cells.
That's great news. Looking forward to seeing that. Great. That concludes our company showcases. Thank you so much, Timothy. That was great. Thank you for answering the questions. If you have
Yes.
if anyone has any more questions or would like to get in touch with Timothy, please let us know. Very happy to connect everyone. So last but not least, I would like to invite Alice Renard from Syncona, Namrata from Apple Tree Partners, and Rushi from Family Office to turn on your cameras and your microphones. So we're starting our fireside chat with investors in this space to discuss limitations and concerns. So if you don't mind coming on now.
I can see everybody there.
I was just trying to see, do you mind taking off the holding slide? It might be better.
Yeah, we can do that. 1 second, let me just stop sharing and we should just be able to see everybody.
Oh, there they are. Hi, welcome. So much for joining us today. Like I said, we will kick off our fireside chat. So my idea with this fireside chat was because running the investment hub, I obviously came across a lot of good technologies and have showcased them to a number of investors and received feedback from both sides. And I started to see some mismatch on what the companies actually have to offer that is really great technology and sometimes what the investors expect from them. So that's what I plan to discuss here. But let's start by quickly introduce our panelists, starting with Alice. Please let us know about your experience and the investment thesis about Syncona.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. I hope you can all hear me well. So my name is Alice Renard. I am a partner at Syncona, so a member of the life science investment team. And I've been in Syncona for 3 years now. I have been involved in setting up one of our most recent gene therapy companies, PureSpring Therapeutics, and also Anavion, which is our biologics company in oncology. So let me tell you a little bit more about Syncona. So I'm just going to keep that very brief, and then if you have more detailed questions, we can delve into that later. So Syncona is a life science investment company that was initially funded by the Wellcome Trust, so back in 2012. And that was really because the Wellcome Trust was growing more and more frustrated with the fact that they were giving away a lot of money to UK biomedical research, but they weren't really seeing the translation of that brilliant science into therapeutic products that were reaching patients. So they really set us up with the vision of delivering transformative treatments to patients. And today our vision really very much remains the same. And our strategy, or how we want to deliver on that vision, is by creating companies that will have the ambition and the ability to take products all the way to market. So we have quite a deep pool of capital, and we are long-term investors. So which means that we really set up our companies. So we start very early on, and then we set up our companies to follow them all the way to product approval and product marketing. And so briefly, what we look for in companies is so products in areas of high clinical unmet needs with the potential to move the needle for patients in so usually in clinical areas and therapeutic areas where we have deep expertise. And a lot of that is cell and gene therapy. As you may know, we have a lot of investments in that field, but that's not to say that we only do that. It's really because that has enabled our model so far, really in defined patient populations with accelerated development pathways, and also with the potential to build a platform and really build a pipeline around the therapeutic area.
Great, really great to have you here. Can we hear from Namrata now, from Apple Tree Partners?
Hi, Joanna. Thank you for having us here. To give you a little bit of background, I am a GP clinician myself, but also had.
You're breaking up a little bit. There must be something going on with the sound.
Can you hear me better now?
comes on and off. Maybe it's the microphone. No, it's very low. So we cannot hear you very well. We go to Rushi and then we can come back to you.
Did you go to Rushi? Yeah.
Okay, it's better. Sorry. Rushi, do you mind stepping in? Well,
Sure.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited about this. So to give you a brief background, I'm a doctor myself, and I'm also in Stanford MBA, and I am mainly looking after healthcare investments for our own family. In terms of our family office, we do have some healthcare operations as well. We have a hospital and a nursing college. So that helps us quite a lot in terms of like the due diligence and all. So that's the reason we invest mainly into healthcare. And in healthcare, we are focused into various sectors, mainly into medical devices. So we have invested into robotics, into AR, VR, simulation surgery and softwares. We've also done a little bit into elderly care, and that's something that's mainly from the impact angle. And I think like that's a growing market. Apart from that, we have also invested a little bit into longevity space, genetics and microbiome. We haven't really invested into advanced therapies, but I'm really excited to be here and I would love to understand more. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rushi. We're very happy to have you here. Namrata, do you think it's working now?
I think so. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, it goes on and up and down, but let's give it a go.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here. And Apple Tree Partners is a biotech fund that was founded over 20 years ago in the US. It's now in New York, Boston, Cambridge, and London and Essex.
Sorry, Namrata, do you mind try selecting another microphone by clicking on the arrow next to the microphone icon? If you have another microphone. Maybe changing the settings might be.
Is this better?
Yeah?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. It goes up and down. I'm not sure if we can hear everything. Go on.
What's happening here? So I think I was talking about Apple Tree. Just saying that the UK is a big area for us now, and we've invested in the US so far in over 30 transformative companies focused on cutting-edge therapies. We've been acquired, so we've got a really good track record. We've got a few companies that are in stealth mode that are in cell and gene therapy. So we should be unveiling them soon. But other examples of our companies include Merck or Kero Therapeutics. Our strategy is very similar to Syncona. We are focusing on building life sciences companies that develop like to work with founders that are very early stage trailblazers in their field, and our team has the expertise to help those founders translate that science into best life aspects. In terms of an introduction to myself, I'm also a medic, and I have trained at Oxford, so local to the area, as well as, but I've done my MBA at Harvard, also worked with BCG as well as in the.
Okay, thank you. We might try maybe if you get out and try to come in again, because the sound is really just up and down the volume. Sometimes we hear it, sometimes we don't. So I don't know, Sarah, what do you think? It might be something like it happened to Timothy just a while ago.
Yes, because it's strange. It goes in and out, so I can hear you perfectly at 1 second and then not.
Yeah, exactly.
Really sorry.
Sorry, Namrata. Do you mind just
on the phone, just Alice's suggestion. Oh, sorry, thank you. If just could you, Namrata, try and dial in from a phone, just on the iPhone, see if that works. If you've got a Zoom account, I will I'll be quiet. If you can ask your next question, Joanna, and then I will.
I'm so sorry. But yeah, I want to be able to hear you, and it was just really difficult to follow. Okay, I'll kick off with the discussion. So my first question from the panelists is in advanced, it's more for Alice really. From advanced therapies, what stage do you like to start getting involved? Is it too early, or is there such a thing as too early or too late for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because we do get that very often. We get a lot of, people coming to us and being like, oh, I have this interesting thing, but it's not the right time. Would you guys look at it now, or is it too
People like me?
early? Yes. So I guess for us, there's really no such thing as too early, because we do like to be involved from very early on. So our model is really to have interactions with leading academics in the field, and then they have an interesting piece of technology that can be turned into a drug. And usually they have this kind of vision, but they're still very early stage. They're still at the preclinical experiments in mice or other animals. But for us, that's actually a great time to start getting involved and start talking. There doesn't need to be an awful lot already done. As long as we can have a product concept that really shows the potential of the therapy, and the science really shows that there is demonstration of efficacy, then everything else we can sort it together. So we really have this partnership approach where we take our time, we discuss what's relevant, we discuss the science, and then everything else we can help with. So the commercial, the business plan, that doesn't need to be bulletproof in any of the investment pitches or anything. We bring this expertise, we bring the business acumen, and we really work hand in hand with academics on that. So so for instance, let me give you an example with PureSpring, right? With PureSpring Therapeutics, we've been talking with Professor Moin Salim and Professor Moro Jaka for more than a year before we launched the company. And initially it was, just to get their opinion on a piece of science or the application for a technology that we thought was really cool. And that's how the discussion started. And then they actually came back to us and they were like, why don't we do something together around this piece of technology? And that's really how we got started. So it's a long process, but there is no such thing as too early, really.
Great, because as I understand it, Syncona is almost a company builder, right? If you see a piece of technology.
Yes. So yes, as you say, we like to position ourselves more as company builder even than just investment firms, because people have this view that investment companies just provide the money. We're in for the long term and we're in as partners. So we provide capital, but we also provide guidance on everything else that usually scientists don't really know how to do. So, writing business plans, defining patient populations, target markets and stuff like that. So it's really a collaborative approach. And we do build the companies with them hands in hands. We take on operational roles. We help them with the facilities, recruiting people and everything. So yeah, we have really this company builders approach.
Great. Namrata, I see you are back. Let's give it a go again.
I'm hoping that this is working.
Yes, I can hear you well now. Go on, please. A quick introduction, and then is something too early for you, basically? Yeah, that's
sure.
Where we are.
So my background is medicine in Oxford, and recently working with Boston Consulting Group. And then previously I've also done an MBA at Harvard and worked with Genentech as well as flagship ventures in the US. Just to give a little bit of a brief background on Appletree Partners, we're a biotech focused firm that was founded over 20 years ago, and we take a global view in all of our investments. So we just started a London office as well as having multiple offices in the US, and we've invested in over 30 transformative companies, over which sort of 19 have gone public or been acquired. In terms of our approach and strategy, so we're very similar in that we're focused on building life sciences companies from scratch and focus on areas of unmet need. And we've invested in companies from kind of pre-IP ideas all the way to asset spin-outs. But especially when you focus on cell and gene therapies, having a partner that's able to support you all the way through, like was mentioned earlier in the panel by Oxford Biomedica, is really important. And we can provide exactly that kind of support. So we work very early with scientific founders, help them develop their ideas, because we have a huge variety of experts, not only in manufacturing, but also on the scientific side, so that we can help them see their science translated into a viable therapeutic that's really going to make a significant difference. And because of that, we've got expertise on both sides of the pond. So you're able to to really get access to a huge network of people that are able to help you develop your company. And we always take a long view in our investments. So we like to support them if possible, all the way from seed through to IP. And we're able to support our cell and gene companies through that. Unfortunately, right now, our cell and gene therapy companies are in stealth mode. Otherwise, we would be hopefully unveiling them shortly. But we're really excited about this space.
Great. That would be my next question. You just answered it. So you definitely about to unveil them and working in this space. So Rushi, now my question for you. I knew you haven't invested in this space yet, but you're definitely considering. May I ask why? What are your concerns around this?
Yeah, so like it's just like the kind of deals that we have seen till now, we just didn't develop the kind of confidence that we want to actually invest in these companies. And oftentimes we don't lead the round, we actually just co-invest with other families. So in terms of families, again, I think like the kind of families that we are associated with, like the networks that we are in, they are much more interested into medical devices or digital health. And so those are the investments that we have done. Apart from that, like with the few deals that we saw, there were some sort of concerns. One of them was that like most of these companies focused a lot on rare diseases, and like these were like very, very rare diseases, and like so the concern was basically like a market size. And with some of the companies, like a lot of the companies, we saw that they were just focusing on cancer. And then like so cancer is something that like a lot of companies are focusing on. So we were really not sure whether like they were the right companies or not. Apart from that, I think like scalability was one of the issues, because like if let's say like if something works for a rare disease and they want to like use the same thing for other diseases, but like to even like scale the solution forward for other applications, I think like that becomes a problem, because like the kind of infrastructure that these companies had in terms of manufacturing, I think like having partners like Alice or Namrata would completely change the entire scenario. But the kind of deals that we saw, they didn't have like that sort of infrastructure to like scale in terms of manufacturing. So these were some of the concerns. So that are some things. And apart from that, like for one company particularly, we thought that let's just give some time and see whether they achieve the milestones that they've written. And also, so we saw that there was some lag in terms of the milestones as well, because like it's a little unpredictable in terms of like how much money goes into R&D, and like there are some launch delays. And also that was another concern that we saw in this. I think we lost her, right?
I think Joanna is on mute.
Yeah.
I was going to say that this is actually very interesting. Oh, she's back. This is very interesting to see, and it's good that we're doing this actually to actually meet the right partners and someone that has the expertise, and then everyone else can basically jump on and trust that it's a well designed plan. And it's interesting that you mentioned platform technologies. Simon Goldman from UCL Technology Fund wrote an article last month just about that, saying that in the old days when the advanced therapies were just starting, they were at UCL Technology Fund, they were very focused on platform technology. So the potential for a technology to address several conditions, but nowadays it's more, okay, it's a platform technology, you can do a lot of things, but the things you're focusing now, do you have a plan to execute them? Do you know how to take them to market? So I would like to ask Namrata or Alice to comment on that. Do you agree, or is that just his opinion?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid view, and I would tend to agree. So basically, just to go back to the platform point, that's something that we obviously put a lot of emphasis on. We need our companies to have a relevant platform, and especially for gene therapy companies, that can take the form of having the adequate manufacturing capabilities, for instance. And I think we've heard throughout the presentations, even earlier today, how difficult that is. I think Catherine from Oxford Biomedica mentioned that it was really difficult indeed. And we at Syncona, we've also recognized that it was a purposeful strategy to invest in manufacturing from the onset, because it can be a differentiating asset in your gene therapy platform. So, investing in things like analytics, process development, optimization of your production, purification, characterization of your finished product, all these type of things turn out to be very valuable and differentiating assets in a gene therapy company. And then the way we qualify platform is based on the vector and the capsid. So for instance, an AAV gene therapy company, they will need to focus and execute and deliver their first program. So, and that goes back to Simon's point, right? It's very important to deliver that. But then once you have delivered that first program, you massively de-risk your platform, right? So you have proven that your in-house capabilities are able to deliver a drug that has been allowed into patients. So now it's just a matter of having different programs that leverage the same platform and the same capabilities, and you very much reduce the risk of developing the second and third drugs into patients. So we see huge values in those platforms.
Okay, so just to address some of the questions of the audience, someone asked if you would invest in enabling technology, which kind of goes into the point: would you invest in an asset that could help your portfolio companies or a company you are considering investing?
So let me just get this correctly. So what do you mean exactly by enabling technology?
So you just mentioned capability, analytics, manufacturing. So any company that is basically supporting these right. companies in cell gene therapy. So would you invest in one of those, either to enable you to invest in another one or to help your companies in the portfolio?
Yeah, so I guess we haven't typically invested in services company. We invest in therapeutics. But having said that, for instance, we had, so there was a company that was merged into one of our gene therapy companies called Gyroscope, and that company was Orbit Biomedical, and they had developed a medical device that enabled very precise delivery, subretinal delivery of cell and gene therapy products initially to the back of the eye. So we had invested in that company, and we realized that it was a massive asset in terms of product delivery for Gyroscope, which is our retinal gene therapy company, and hugely enabling there. So the strategy there was to combine those two companies. And so Orbit Biomedical is now part of Gyroscope Therapeutics for that reason.
Okay, that's great to know. Namrata wants to say something. Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say I think in ATP as well, we followed a very similar approach in that so far our approach has been very much focused on therapeutics. But if there is a technology that would help enhance the company that we're building, we would either try and develop it in-house or try and see if you could license out a deal like this to ultimately get the product to market as soon as possible and de-risk the technology.
I think that's a very interesting strategy. It's basically you want to invest in something, but maybe there isn't the infrastructure that you need to actually take it to market, and then you actually license it yourself, basically, and get it to market yourself, so you can advance the sector. Is that yeah, okay, that's what you had in mind. Yeah. Ruchi, actually, I was just thinking maybe that's a way out for you. You can start investing in enabling technologies for the sector. What do you think?
Yeah, this looks really interesting. I think and that would have the advantage of working with others as well. So I think that's something very interesting that came out of this panel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We actually didn't plan for this, but it's nice that it came out of it. Okay. So another thing that I wanted to touch upon, and this is more for the cell and gene therapy investors, more in depth. Something that I came across when I was looking at applications is that sometimes academics or early stage spin-outs, they do agreements with pharma, collaboration agreements that might not be attractive to investors. I was just wondering what's an attractive collaboration agreement in that case. So how can they not shoot themselves in the foot in that instance? I would like to hear Namrata now. That's okay.
Sure. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to this question. Ultimately, it really depends on the individual company. If you're, for example, doing collaborations whereby you're working with collaborators that have better disease models that will ultimately help you de-risk your technology and show that that science much better, then we support those collaborations, whether they're academic or whether they might be pharmaceutical as well. But ultimately, our goal is to try and help develop the company sort of as it goes forward. And we don't really we focus much more on the science than it is on the actual collaborations. And ultimately, our goal is to focus on the best science that there is out there.
Mm-hmm. I see. Well, to rephrase that, actually, what was said at the time in terms of feedback was that the deal was too complex for the investor to come in. So I'm not sure what that meant. It might have something to do with IP, or what do you think, Alice? What do you think it was?
Yeah, so I think I would tend to agree to what Namrata has said. There's never a one-size-fits-all for any deal, but we do pay a lot of attention to IP and ownership of IP, because ultimately that's underpinning the asset that you're licensing and that's going to go into the company. So that is very important. And in terms of collaborations with pharma per se, I mean, I think that because of our particular model, we don't come across that very often. Because we do tend to, just talk with academics and scientists even before they have created their company or before they have made any type of partnership with pharma or anyone else. So it's not really something that we see very often.
Okay, good to know that that's not a limitation, at least for now. There is an interesting question on the chat. Have you looked at investment into ready-to-go MHRA licensed GMP facilities? So basically creating the infrastructure or investing in the infrastructure. I'm not sure what David means with that. To expand on that, David? David? He's not here.
Yeah, sorry, I was just.
Oh, there you go. Would you like to expand on that, please?
Yeah, I just wondered whether they had either looked at or invested historically into GMP facilities that were ready to go. So maybe based in a hospital or university or whatever, and they want to, in summary, get out of the financial commitment that these facilities have and look to run a more commercially based centre.
That's a very fair question. Yeah, go ahead.
David, that's a really interesting point that you're making. And actually, manufacturing, like we talked about, is one of the key areas that is holding this field back. And to that point, if once I think an investment fund in general gets to a certain number of cell and gene therapy companies in its portfolio, I think it makes absolute sense to try and invest in these facilities, because a lot of these organizations actually demand the payment up front when you're trying to manufacture and develop the product to take it to clinical trials. And it can be a large commitment that you're putting up. And so it is something, we don't have one currently, but I'm sure it seems like a very interesting idea to consider in the future. And perhaps if Alice can weigh in on that, because they already have so many companies in their portfolio.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with your answer. Actually, I think if you think about it, there's a lot of the investment that you make into those cell and gene therapy companies that actually go to manufacturing, right? And you can be thinking of having those kind of synergies and scaling effect of putting several companies and actually having those manufacturing facilities dedicated. I think for me, it comes back to the point that we were discussing earlier on, enabling and services companies. So it's probably not something that we would invest in ourselves, but we do work a lot in partnership with those facilities. And I think one that comes to mind is the cell and gene therapy catapult in the UK, for instance. So they know us, they know a lot of our companies, a lot of them have lab space in there. So I think it's important to be very well plugged into the environment. And I do believe that the UK has actually a very good network of manufacturing for those kind of advanced therapies, and probably more than what you would find elsewhere in Europe. So it's important for us to be supportive and really work in partnership with all the actors in the field there.
Okay, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the manufacturing facilities are actually for clinical studies, not to the scale maybe that is needed. Is that right, Namrata?
I think there are organizations that are able to help you to sort of develop, scale and manufacture this. But in terms of large scale manufacturing, I would defer to Alice on this.
Yeah,
I think they have a center in Stevenage actually, which is backed by the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, and one further north as well.
Yeah, but my question is it enough for the scale up, large scale up that some therapies need?
I think it depends on the disease indication that you're going after. If you're going after a disease that has several thousands of patients that you're treating, I don't think those facilities exist right now at that scale. So I think those would need, which is why I think these companies need a large amount of investment to put in and to get to that level, which comes to sort of the other point about so far, it's been a natural marriage whereby you're looking. A lot of cell and gene therapy companies are focused on rare diseases where there's a finite small population of patients that you're treating, where you're able to get to that scale and treat them at a decent timeline. But as the focus of cell and gene therapy shift to diseases that have a larger prevalence and incidence, then this would need to be reconsidered. And unfortunately, we're the first company that does this. We will likely face a lot of challenges, but may transform the field as they get to that scale.
Exactly. We just need the infrastructure, I guess, to be there to help them. This brings me back to Ruchi. I don't know about you, but I think there is a niche here. I don't know if you're seeing this, of the manufacturing bit of it. I was just wondering if this is something that would make you change your mind, if you could see a very clear niche in this sector that you could help with whatever networks or expertise. Do you think you have the networks and expertise that could help in some of these bits?
Yeah, in fact, like when this discussion was going on, I was in fact thinking about like the cold chain and the cold rooms, because we have invested into such logistical solutions. And there's a very good business model for that, because like it's just like you just have to maintain the place and then you can just rent it out to various companies based on like, so that has been a profitable business for us. Like what we didn't think about, like because especially in this part of the world, there's not much cell and gene therapy research and all going on. But cold store is something that like all the pharma companies need. There's so many, like even food and restaurant company needs. So cold store and cold chain is something that clean rooms, these are things that we have invested into. But I think like this is the natural next step for progression into that. I think it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's falling into place, isn't it? It just feels that way. Great. Another question from the chat, and we might have to wrap up soon. Question from the chat: how do you value the companies you consider investing in? I think every single one of you can answer this one. Rushi, do you mind starting?
Yeah, so it depends on the negotiation with the entrepreneur. It's a lot of dance that you have with the entrepreneur, and then the different family offices that invest with us. Like there's like collaboration with them, and like it's all about like the kind of IP the company has and the kind of team the company has, market size, and all of those factors go into it. But at the end of it, it's all about negotiation and the trust that you build over the time, because sometimes like there's such hard negotiations that you don't even feel like investing in such companies. So I think apart from negotiation, there's also a huge component of trust that comes into play.
Absolutely. Alice, do you want to say something about this in terms of how do you value the companies you invest in?
Yeah, so I guess I wasn't quite sure whether you wanted the question to focus on purely financial valuation or
yes,
more.
Yes, please. Let's go on the financial side of things.
Okay, right. So this is obviously a very technical topic. I guess just to keep it simple, what we do at Syncona is, so obviously, before any formal investment, we build models, financial models to value the companies, and that is really based on taking the lead programs or the lead indications that the company will develop their product in, and forecasting what that market will be. So it's very much an exercise to forecast the total addressable market, and then how much of that market will your product target and treat patients there. And then we do a lot of thinking on the price and the revenue that could be addressed that way. And then I guess this is very indicative in terms of what we base our decision on. This is one element of us investing in a company. It's not to say that this is the one only or the most crucial one, but then we put that in perspective. We consider the entire package, and as Ruchi say, it's everything around the team, the science, the legals, the IP, and everything. And then like everything has to tie within our strategy for us to have the okay and invest.
Absolutely. Namrata, do you want to have a crack at this one?
Sure. I think it's very similar to what both Alice and Ruchi have said. I think we look at it in terms of four main buckets. The first being, is this technology showing a transformational improvement in an area of unmet clinical need? So is this really going to change the field that you're in? Secondly, does the team have the right expertise? Are these the people that are the pioneers in this field and that we can work with? And then thirdly, looking at, is this a strong IP that you're able to build a company around? And then finally, because of this unmet need, is this able to command the right price point and and generate the right revenue and to be able to succeed in this field? And so when you put all of those things together, you're able to come up with a value for the company. And obviously the stage that the asset is in, what requirements and resources that they're going to have will also play a huge part in this. But it isn't you plug certain numbers in and it spits out a value. There's a lot of soft factors that play into it. So it ends up being a much more complex process in coming up with a number for that company.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, it's nice that you mentioned the transformational impact, basically, of a therapy. And that was one of my questions when I was showcasing companies in this space to investors, is that usually, or so far, the therapies that have been invested in, they are transformational. There is nothing out there yet, at least, that is addresses chronic conditions. So I know Alice has some news around that. We can give her some time to talk about that. But most of the things out there are mainly focused on curative, on transformational. I was just wondering, maybe we're losing sight that we could be addressing other chronic conditions that are actually quite costly for the health systems, and maybe at the end of the day we could save a lot of money and help a lot of people if we could address those conditions as well. But so far, apparently, it's not worth it. So I would say ask Alice to say something about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I actually think that your 2 points kind of go hand in hand, because you have transformational efficacy in a lot of diseases that are actually chronic diseases and long-term diseases. And I think that's really what attracted us in the field initially. So, Syncona has been focusing on gene therapy since it started, basically. So, and 2012, 2013, and that was really because the efficacy that we saw from the early data that was generated by them was really profound. So let me give you an example. So one of our company, Freeline, that we founded early on, was based on the work of Amit Naswani, Professor Amit Naswani at UCL. And he was working with hemophilia patients, and he developed this gene therapy product that basically delivered the gene for the protein that was missing in these hemophilia patients. So those patients have a deficit in the coagulation cascade. They're missing a clotting factor, which means that they would bleed all the time if they didn't have those regular supplementation of this protein factor, which we call enzyme replacement therapy. So it's basically injections every day, long infusion times and everything. What Amit Naswani showed was when he infused this gene therapy to patients, they could have long-lasting effect, and they could be weaned off that chronic administration of enzymes. And this has been shown 10 years ago, and those patients are still off the chronic use of the enzyme replacement therapy. Now, they may still need some ad hoc enzyme replacement therapy for particular or interventions or stuff like that, but this is a transformational effect that has changed the chronic management in this disease. And we are really excited we were very excited with the potential back then, and we're still very excited. So, Pure Spring Therapeutics that I mentioned earlier, we are looking to do the same again, developing transformational treatments for patients that suffer from chronic kidney diseases, where there aren't that many good therapeutic options at the moment. But this time we are much better, we are much clever at developing these kind of therapies, because we have all the learnings from the companies that we built previously. So we really want to, set everyone for success, the company, the patients, and ultimately society as well. Because if you think about those treatments, it's one injection, and then they potentially they will be cured. That's kind of the potential for these therapies. Mm-hmm. So they won't have to go through those costly procedures in the healthcare system. So that's really the potential that everyone is excited about in the field. We are very excited about, and I know that Emrata has a similar view. So I don't know if she wants to comment on that as well.
No, absolutely. I think it is a really exciting space, and I think the potential is massive. However, it is going to be an initial pain for those pioneers that are starting out and looking at these diseases that have a sort of greater incidence, like we were saying, because until these manufacturing issues are solved and until we develop the technology a little bit more, I think addressing the more complex diseases will be harder to do. And you're going to have to see a change in the business models as well, that not only that pharmaceuticals have, in where they shift from a large-scale manufacturing process to developing autologous gene therapy or stem cells as a service. And so once we're able to do that, and once there is a change in that mindset, I think you're going to see this paradigm shift happening. And I think to an extent it's already starting to happen, because you've seen big pharma starting to buy up a lot of these CAR T cell therapies. You're seeing that shift happen, but until that happens at a much larger scale, it might not allow that transition into some of the more chronic diseases.
Yeah, that would be my next point, because with chronic diseases, the prevalence is a lot much bigger. So how are you going to produce it? That's the question.
Absolutely, and you could see that you could look at it by looking at allogeneic models, for example, rather than the autologous ones, to see if you can standardize some of the manufacturing processes, or you think about setting up manufacturing hubs at a sort of a geographic distance. I mean, seeing as the number of trials that are there and the focus that there is on cell and gene therapies, you could try, if there's a collaboration or a consortium between big pharma companies, you can set up these cell and gene therapy hubs throughout either Europe and the US initially to begin with, and see how those models work, whereby a lot of these other companies could channel their development through those.
Yeah. Speaking of the US, another question just came on the chat. So Anne is asking, is there much syndication between US and UK, European investors on cell and gene therapy opportunities, given the market dominance of the US in most business plans? Who would like to take this one? Do you want to take this one, Namrata?
Sure. I think it really depends on the individual fund's investing model. For example, at ATP, we prefer not to do syndicates if we can, so that you're able to provide a uniform development plan and view in the boardroom to speed up development as soon as possible. However, I know, especially in Europe, there is a tendency to syndicate more, and perhaps in cell and gene therapy plays, there might be a role for this, given the high capital requirements that are there, that companies may need to syndicate. And there's nothing from preventing a global partnership across the US and the UK to allow this to happen. Because as Alice mentioned, the UK is a big hub for cell and gene therapy in Europe. And ideally, you know, the best science happens at the intersection of different disciplines and different geographies, because talent is spread across the world. And if we're able to harness all of that expertise, then you set yourself up for success in a very tricky field potentially.
Yeah, and if I can just add on to that, I think I don't want to repeat what Namrata said, because we have a similar view on syndication. So because we tend to be funding investors early stage for companies, we tend to start building companies alone. But if the partners bring something else than capital to the table, so for instance, access to the US market, then it does make sense for us to partner there. And ultimately what we want is set up our companies to be best positioned to compete globally, because the healthcare market is globalized. So you can't just set your company in the UK and rely just on the UK market. So for instance, if we want our company to access the US market, then it makes sense to have some partnership with investors in the US.
Yeah, also because the US, tend to have much more money, basically, to invest in anything, not just cell and gene therapy. What are your views on this, Rishi, just to finalize, and then we can go to the last question on the chat.
Yeah, I think like one of the things with the US is like there is a lot of money to invest into these companies, but the valuation also increases quite a lot. But if you compare the valuation from Europe, for instance, the valuation is much less. So in such cases, like we particularly feel that if the valuation is less, it brings up a bigger opportunity. And for some of the companies, we have followed a business model in which we would invest in companies in Europe and then bring them to the US for exits. And that becomes really interesting, because you get a better valuation on an exit in the US. And I think that's the trend a lot of companies are following as well. But like if you look at the valuations for early stage companies, the valuations in the US are much, much higher. And like, especially in the healthcare sector, they're so much higher that it's really difficult to actually even work up a syndicate deal there.
Absolutely. And something that we have seen is actually a lot of US investors coming to Europe for lower valuations, even in cell and gene therapy. So, yeah. So, last question from the chat, a question for Alice and Namrata. Please work with academics, researchers, founders, or would you work with startups that haven't originated in academic research? So I would think from an accelerator or not from research.
Sure. Do you want to go first?
I mean, I'm happy to. Sorry for interrupting. So I'd just say that it goes back to what we're looking for, really. And we are looking for transformational products, transformational science. And usually we find that level of innovation from universities and from talking with academics. So that's really our preferred model. That's not to say that we will only look there, but it's basically our way of looking for things. You know, having said that, we funded Blue Earth Diagnostic, which is one of the companies we previously owned, with an asset that was from GE Healthcare. So it's really our preferred model.
Sure. I think absolutely, Alice. We have a very similar view. We tend to go with the best science that is coming out of different academic institutions, and going with the PIs that have the most interesting work that has been published, or if we have access to unpublished, really exciting data. However, that doesn't preclude us from working with startups that haven't originated from academic research, but still have that exciting science and that game-changing technology that we would love to be part of and provide the expertise to help commercialize.
I guess the thing about going mostly to academic researchers is almost that because they come with the advisors almost straight away, right? Because they have that background of how the technology was developed. And I think it's also already made advisory or KOL group that is already there. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think what we like to find in our academic founders is really this level of understanding of the technology and this expertise that got them to ultimately this product that will turn into a therapy for patients. So, and in order to reach that point, you need, I don't even know how many years of having worked in that field and really knowing the ins and outs of what's needed for patients there, and what is the technology that is going to give you something that will meet the unmet need at the moment.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Stepan. I'm sorry, the host just muted me. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, if it was just for me to wrap up. I will, don't worry. Thank you so much. This was really interesting for me. I hope it was interesting for the audience as well. I definitely have some really interesting notes now to think about and some take-home messages. Just to wrap up, I would like to ask each one of you a take-home message from this. Basically, now we exchanged ideas. We talked about the challenges and limitations. What is your take-home message, especially for companies fundraising in this space, if they're very innovative? What is your advice? Alice, go on.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you can focus on the patient, focus on the clinical unmet need, and how is your technology best placed to address this unmet needs.
Great. Namrata?
My advice would be to find the right partners in this space, ideally someone that's able to provide sort of three things: the money, the expertise, and the commitment to visualize the dream or the treatment that you're working on, and then translate that.
So basically someone that aligns with your values, basically.
Exactly.
Not just for the money. Ruchi, what is your advice for new which is, I think, universal in a lot of things in healthcare?
Yeah, I think for me, like focusing on a big market is really important, and there is such a huge unmet need in chronic diseases like diabetes and chronic kidney disease, as Alice was saying. So I think like focusing on those diseases, if something is possible from on that front, I think that would become really important, not just for an investment point of view, but even to bring down the burden of healthcare costs worldwide, right? So I think like that's something interesting to think about if it's possible, and I see for sure like in the near future it would be possible, but just to like if founders are just starting, then think about a bigger market. I think that would be really good, and then definitely look for a reimbursement plan as well, because in some of the companies we've realized that like in terms of reimbursement becomes really difficult.
That's actually a topic that I had on my list, but we don't have time to touch upon because it would take a long time to actually discuss, but that's very, very important. So thank you so much for helping me with these questions and talking about the challenges of advanced therapy.
Thank you very much for the invite.
Thank
No
you so
worries.
much for having us.
Thank you. This has been great. I hope you enjoyed as well, the audience that is still with us. Thank you so much. From the MedCity team, we are really, really grateful to have all these speakers this evening, and we're really grateful to you for attending. If you want to know anything more about the Investment Hub, the ATN, everything we do at MedCity, please contact us. And if you're interested in any of the companies that showcased today, thank you very much for attending, and I wish you a really nice evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna, I just made you the host because I thought I might have to go any second for school pickup. Can you stop the recording